do is validations. Does anybody know what that means? What does it mean if we're going to validate something?
It means we have to validate any user input. So
Okay. But you just use the word to define itself.
to check.
What do we mean if we're validating?
To check if the user input is sanitized.
So sanitization and validation are kind of two separate things. Sanitation means we're potentially changing something versus validation, which is, I think Max has an idea here.
Let's see, checking the user's input relative to the server data to see if it matches up.
Sort of. I mean, we're not necessarily checking it relative to the data because let's say somebody is creating a new whatever. So today we're going to be doing new movies because movies are fun. So users creating a new movie and the inputs that they've given us do not meet the criteria that we're specifying, right? So what if they give us like an empty title for the movie? We may want to say, hey, no, you can't create that movie because we're requiring that you create a title. Or if they give us no description, we could say the same thing. That's not acceptable because I'm requiring that you give me some kind of a description when you create this movie.
Oh,
right?
is that the one when you put a password and then it says it needs like lowercase, higher, like lowercase?
That's validation. Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit more complex than the validations we're going to be doing today because we're kind of starting a little bit simple on this. So we're not doing login reg yet, but we'll be covering that tomorrow. Yes, Max.
So in a sense, it's like, say you have me fill out a form, everything that has that asterisk by it requires the validation, right? Like, so it needs to be filled out kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're telling a user you must provide a title, how do we enforce that? All right. And so in our Django projects, we're going to be enforcing that on the server side, not on the client side. The client side being the actual browser. You can have JavaScript validations as well. So you can have two kinds of validations. You can have the front end stuff that's happening in the browser and then also the back end stuff. At the very least, we want to have back end validations, okay? Because that is the last stop before something actually gets into our database. So we need to make sure it meets our specifications. All right, so to do this, let's create a new Django project. Right, let me go to my Dojo directory, Python, lectures. Okay, now, hey. Yeah. All right, so what do I need to do before I create a new Django project? Get the environment activated every time, right? So let's activate that environment, source, up one level into my environments.
Does it matter
Django.
when you actually activate the environment? Like for instance, like I just CD in my desktop and then activate it. Like, does it really matter when exactly you activate the environment? Or just
Well, you're gonna have to activate it before you create your project.
yeah, before you. That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
You're obviously like trying CDing into like your projects folder, right? And then you activate it.
Yeah. So what happened was.
Whereas like that's like activating my environment is like the first thing I do before I even get into my projects folder. I just wanted to know like if that is gonna end up getting
No, those two things could be switched.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So all I'm doing is I'm getting to where I want to go, and then I'm activating my environment rather than having to navigate to it, and then sort of navigate back to where I am. So I like to do that in one step so that it's just less work. All right, so let's create this Django project. I'm going to do that how? Django admin start project. Okay, so I'll just call this validations demo. Okay, fair enough. And now we want to open that up in our VS Code. So code validations demo. There we go. Now, of course, if I open up my terminal down here, I've lost my environment, right? So I'm going to rectify that. That a little bit bigger. So source, up a couple levels. Whoa. Django bin activate. Cool. So now that we've got our project, what's the other thing that we generally have to create? Our app. So I'll say Python manage.py start app. Just call this our main app. Fair enough. Okay. And what's the other thing I need to do now that I've created this main application to alert my or to register it with the project? Where do I need to go? To my settings.py. So that's in here. Installed apps down here. Just add this main. Okay, cool. And then since this is actually going to have a web page component, we're going to want to do something with our URLs, right? So let's open up that urls.py. I'll close this. Go down here. So we're importing this path function. I don't need this admin app right now. Okay. And then I'm going to say path of an empty string. So that means that the prefix for this app is just going to be an empty string. Basically, there is no prefix, right? And then what am I going to call in here? Include. Oh, do I have that function? No, you can see I'm getting this little squiggly down here, undefined variable. I can import it from here. Okay. And then what am I going to include? Main.urls. And now, as I'm looking at things, do I have that file? So if I open up my main folder, is there a urls.py? Not currently, right? So I'm going to grab this, copy this guy, and then inside main, let's create that other urls.py that we want. Now I know I'm going to bring in my path. That's why I copied it from the project level urls.py. Okay. What else do I need to do down here? Anybody know? Remember? We're going to create this variable called URL patterns, which is what kind of data structure? A list, not a dictionary. Okay, and then we'll say path. So let's say my index route. And then what am I going to put here? Views. Okay, do I have this variable called views? No, so I need to actually get it, right? So I need to say import from dot, which is the current directory that I'm in, import views. Okay. Now if I go over here and I say views.index, now we have to ask ourselves, does this index function exist?
No.
Not currently, right? So if I go inside views, no, I've got nothing. So let's just create a def index, right? Def index. Okay, that's going to take in the request. And then let's just render out some template. Excuse me. So we'll say return render. Got to pass in the request every time, right? And I want to render index.html. Does that file exist?
No.
No. So let's create a templates folder inside our main. Index.html. Okay. Let's just get some stuff in there. And then we'll say h1 validations. Okay, very good. So is there anything else that I need to do here before I...
You need to add, right? You need to add. Don't you need to tell? Oh, never mind. Don't you need to put template/index.html, or am I
You're tripping.
tripping? On my previous ones, I had it for some weird reason.
Really?
For sure.
No, yeah, it should be looking inside that templates folder automatically. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's just clear this out and let's see if we can run this project, right? So how are we going to do that? Python manage.py run server. Okay, and then let's try to open it up and just make sure that things are as we expect. Localhost 8000. There we go. We've got a working project, right? Cool. All right. Now, we said that we're going to be doing validations today, so we're going to need to have some kind of object that we're working with. And what I was saying is that for this, let's create a movie model. So we're going to be creating some movies. So for now, I'm just going to stop the server here, and let's close out a couple of these files. Where do we need to go if we're going to create our model? Shell. Let's go to our models.py, right, and actually create something. Right? So let's say class movie. And then what am I to pass in these parentheses here? Models dot model. Okay. So let's say we want to have a title, right? And that's going to be a models.char field. Say max length equals what? 45? That's fine.
You don't want long movie?
Yeah, no long movies for us. All right, and then we'll have a description. And this will be a models.text field. So meaning that we should be able to enter in, as long of a description as we like. That's cool. The other thing that I want to put in here is just a year. Okay, and that will be a models.integer field, I believe. Okay, and then I'm going to give some timestamps in here. So we want our created at and our updated at. Stamps. Okay, good deal.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you have to put a max length for the year?
Max length?
Yeah.
No. Why would we need to do that?
Because otherwise you will enter, for example, I can enter
Are you a
like
time
the year.
traveler? You know about future?
No, like 10,000.
We can do that in our validations if you want.
Okay, I see,
Yeah,
I see.
yeah, we can definitely do that. All right, so now that I've created this, excuse me, model, what else do we need to do to get it to actually work with our project? So I got my terminal open down here still. Okay, so we need to make our migrations, right? So we'll go Python manage.py make migrations. Okay, and then inside of our migrations folder, we now have this file here that's going to migrate our movie class, right? So there's the name movie. Cool, good deal. And then to complete the migration, I have to say migrate. Let's go back in here. We'll say Python manage.py migrate. Excuse-moi. There we go. So it's migrated a bunch of stuff, one of which being the session table, right? So if we ever need to use session in our app, it should now be available. All right, cool. Now let's run it again. Server. Okay. And then we're going to want to create some kind of a form where we can actually have a user insert a movie, right? So let's do that. So let's go to our template there. So where are we? Inside our index.html, let's just create this form. Okay. And I need to insert something in here in the action. Can anyone tell me what the action attribute's doing? It's basically routing where the form gets submitted. Exactly. So let's say I want this form to be submitted to a route of /movies. Okay. And then I also need to specify the method. What's the method that we typically use? Host. All right. And then I'm going to create some inputs here. So the first one's just going to be title. We'll call this title. Group. And then the next one's going to be our description. I'm going to change this one to a text area. area. Okay, so this would be description. I don't need the ID here. Okay, very good. And then the other thing that we wanted was the year, right? So we'll do input group again, year. I want to change this to number actually. So I want that to be some kind of an integer, right? All right, and then I'm going to have a button to submit this guy. Okay, let's just refresh this, make sure that our form is in there. There we go. A div? No, you can use p tags if you want. It's really up to you. Yeah, not too big of a deal there. All right, and then let's say underneath this, maybe I want to loop through all the movies that I have so far, right? So the way that we could do this, we could do it in different ways, but I'm just going to do it inside of a table. So let's just create a little table here. It's going to have a t head, a t row. How many THs? 3. Okay, and then we'll go up a couple levels into my t body, t row, and I'll have 3 table datas. There we go. Okay, so this is going to be the title, description, year. Okay, and then if we come down here, how are we going to show all of the movies? You guys remember how we can loop through something here? I feel like I have a shortcut that I created for each Python. Oh, sick. I do indeed. For element in elements. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for movie in movies. Oops. Movies. Okay, and then let's just move this table row inside there. Okay, so what am I going to put inside the first one? I want to show the title. How do I get that? Movie.title. So I'm going to use the double mustache to actually output it, right? Movie.title. And then I'll do the same thing here. Movie.description. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So the only thing is here, do I have access to movies yet? Not yet, right? Because when I was rendering the template, I wasn't passing along any data to go with it. All right. So how can we do that? Let's go back to our views.py and check this out. So in order to have access to my movies, I'm going to need my movie class, right? So the way I can get to that is I can say from dot, which is our current directory, models, import movie. Exactly. All right. So now that I have that, we'll be able to get all of our movies. So let's do this. Let's create this context dictionary that we're going to need to render the template, right? We'll say context equals a dictionary. And then I'm going to have this key of movies. And what am I going to set that equal to? Objects.all. Okay? So that should give me all of the movies that are in my database, right? And then how do I pass this along to the template? So yeah, as a third argument after this index.html, let's actually provide this context dictionary. Okay? And let's see if our template's still working. Should be, right? We haven't done anything that would potentially break it. We don't have any rows in here because we don't have any data in our database. All right, fair enough. So now the thing that we need to handle is this form submission, right? So right now we've got this form. We've got a route. Do we have this route yet in our URLs? No. So we're going to need to add that as well. So let's go to our urls.py here. Let's put it up here. So our path is going to be movies, like that. And we'll say the views is going to be, I'm going to call it something like add movie. Now, before I save this file, I'm realizing to myself that I don't yet have this method, right? I don't have that function. So let's go build it. All right. So let's go back to our views here, and let's create an add movie function. Add movie. That's going to take in the request, right? All right. Now, how am I gonna create a new movie inside here? Does anybody remember from those shell activities that we were doing?
The create thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'd say something like movie.objects.create, right? And then inside here, I can say title equals, where am I gonna get the title?
Name.
Request.post title, right? All right, so I'm going to do one thing here that's going to make our lives a little bit easier. I'm going to say form, or let's just call it post for now. Post equals request.post. The reason why I'm going to do that is because I don't want to specify request.post title, request.post description. I just want to say post.title, post.description, okay? So I've taken a small little detour here just so I have reference to whatever came through that request.post. So we'll say title equals post, and then in brackets title. Maybe I'll put this on different lines just for readability. I just do okay. Description equals post description. Okay, and then finally year equals post at year. However, there is one small thing that I need to do there with the year. Does anybody know what it is? I'm trying to make this an integer in my database, but when it comes to my back end, what form is this going to be in? It's going to be a string. Okay? So what if I go like that, right? All right. So that'll create it for us.
Why is your int outside of your post? Should it be inside the post? You're testing it?
Inside. Why would it be inside? So post at year is giving me a string, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm calling this int function to then convert it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now what are we going to do after we've created our new movie? Yeah, usually we're just going to redirect. We're going to send them back to a page where they can actually see, hey, this thing's been created. All right. Do I have my redirect function here? No, it isn't available. So let me import that. Redirect. So we'll come down here, and then after this, let's return redirect. Let's just send them back to the index route because that's where we're showing all of their movies, right? Cool. So we're pretty good. So now we can save our urls.py. There's one other thing that I just remembered I did not include inside the form. Do you guys remember what it is?
What's the
CS.
The CSRF token. We always have to include that in Django. All right. So let's drop it in there. CSRF. Okay. Cool. Now let's give this a try. So let's come here and let's enter in a movie. Does anybody have any suggestions here? Any favorites?
NCIS, but that's not even.
NCIS. Is there a movie for it? There might be. There might be.
NCIS? This one should melody dogs.
That's awesome.
Did someone say Star Wars? I think I heard.
Interstellar.
Oh, Interstellar. Okay.
Saving Private Ryan.
Interstellar. Some stellar description.
Wow.
You like that? All right.
Don't worry.
Last Tom Cruise.
Yeah, thank you. What year do you think Interstellar came out? Is that like 5 years ago or something?
That was like what, 14, 15? Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. 2014. All right, let's try this.
It's a good movie.
Oh man, it failed because I didn't refresh the page. Whoops. All right, let me try it again. stellar, some stellar description. Best movie, was it that good? I haven't seen it yet.
Pretty good.
I thought it was pretty good.
All right. Did you say you watch it every day?
No, I was not that much.
Oh, okay. So good. That must be some movie if you're gonna watch it every day, right? All right. So this is good. We created a new movie, right? And it's showing up on our table. Let's put one more in there before we start getting to the validations part. What other movie do we want to drop in there? Constantine?
Oh, John Wick.
John Wick.
Okay.
With the dog?
Just
Yes.
just because it's Keanu, I think it needs to go in there. All right. What's Keanu is the best, right? Whoa. All right. Nice. All right. When do we think John Wick came out?
I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that on the actual. I'm gonna loop it.
2014.
Oh, it's 2014 on that?
There's a few of them now. That's
Yeah.
fine.
All right. Yeah. How many are there? Three? Three John Wicks. All right. Wow. Jeez. Yeah. Why stop now, right? All right.
2014 was a good year.
Yeah, it was a good year. Here we go. Cool. So now we've got our stuff working. We're able to create new movies. But let's actually do some validating here, right? So if a person enters in some blank data, no title or something like that, or no description, let's make sure they can't actually get that into our database. All right. So has anyone gotten to validations yet? Probably not. That's fine. No problem. Let's look back at our models here. Now, thus far, we've been using something in our models that we didn't really know anything about. Remember how we would say movie.objects? We're actually going to do something with the objects this time around. But before we do that, let's create this thing called a manager class. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to prevent things from getting through that we don't want to get through. So I'm going to create a movie manager. And I'm going to inherit from something. This time, I'm going to inherit from models.manager. Manager. Okay. And then I'm going to create a method inside this. We're just going to call it basic validator because we're just validating. So basic def basic validator. And I always need to take in self, right? The other thing that I'm going to take in is going to be some post data, which is just going to be the data that comes in through the form. So I'm going to say post data. Okay. Now we're going to start running some checks against this post data. So what's my post data going to have inside of it for this particular? It's going to have title, description, and year, right? Those three things. All right, cool. So let's just do some checks. I'm going to create an errors, probably a list in this case. Now in the platform, they're going to have you create it as a dictionary. Let's do it the platform way so you guys don't get confused. Okay, so we're just going to create an errors dictionary. Okay. Now what's going to happen is that I'm going to run through each one of these inputs and make sure that they're okay. If they're not okay, then I want to add something to my errors dictionary, right? Each time that I run in, something does not work. Okay? So let's check and make sure that they've provided a title. So how can I do that? I can use this len function to tell me how long the string is. So I can say post data title is less than 1. Then what does that mean? They've given me an empty title, right? Okay. So now I can say errors, and then the key that I'm going to say is just going to be title. I'm going to specify a message here. I'm going to say something like, please provide a title. Okay. And then we can kind of do the same thing. So I can basically duplicate this down. So let's say if the length of the description was less than 1, that means they provided me an empty description, right? Please provide a description. All right. Now, now comes kind of the tricky part, because we've got this year, right? What happens if the year comes through as a blank string, and I want to actually validate that as an integer? What might happen then?
It will convert it to a 0.
Well, it might actually error out. Okay, so that could be a problem. So let's say, let's just try it as it is though. So we'll say if post data at year, and I'm going to convert that into a int, and I'm going to say if it's less than, when do you guys think the first movies came out? 1920 something? Oh, it was 18 something? No, right?
18 something.
Really? All right, let's just keep it simple. So if it's less than 1900, 1888. Okay, fine. 18. So then let's just add an error for that, right? We'll say errors at year.
Oh yeah, it is 80.
Okay. Please provide a valid year. Okay. So we'll just stick with that for now. And then at the end of this function, what I want to do is I want to return back this errors dictionary that we got. Okay. So I'll say return errors. Okay. Now, in order for me to actually connect this to my movie class, I need to come down to my actual movie class and say objects equals movie manager. What does that mean that I have these parentheses here at the end of movie manager? Yeah, we're creating a new instance of this movie manager class. Exactly. Very good. Okay, so the objects property that has been available to us all along, we're now basically overriding that. We're overriding that with this new instance of the movie manager class that we just created. And that's going to allow us to do our validations. Any questions about this before we go on with the validations part?
Why do you want to return the error dictionary where the error dictionary is empty?
Because what's going to happen is when we call this function, wow, I spelled that wrong. Validator, right? When we call this function, we want whatever code is calling it to get back that errors dictionary so that it knows, were there any errors? Otherwise, the code that's calling this function won't know what was the result of the validation. Okay?
So you are basically adding this if statement inside the error dictionary, is that correct?
Yeah, so this is just happening inside here, and then, so when we return out the errors dictionary, let's say that we had one error right here, like the title was, title was empty, something like that. That means that our errors dictionary will now have one key value pair in it, right?
Which is the error title.
Which is this right here.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, AJ.
Would you please explain one more time the objects inside the movie class?
Yeah, so this has actually been available to us all along. We've been using it, right? When we say something like movie.objects.create.
Yeah.
Only this time we're actually overwriting it with this instance that we just created. Okay. So we're giving it some extra functionality that it didn't have before. And that's coming from up above, which was that movie manager that we just created. Okay. All right, now let's go inside our views.py So when we're going to create a movie, rather than just create it right away, let's actually run our validations against it, right? So I'm going to say something like this. Errors equals movie.objects.basic_validator. And then what do you guys think I'm going to pass into this basic validator? So it's telling me right there it needs the post data, right? Okay. I have that saved in the variable right now, which is right here. So I can just pass in the post, right? All right. Now, how will I know if there were any errors that just came back from this function? If the errors dictionary had some key value pairs in it, right? We can use the length function for that as well. So if we use a length function on a dictionary, it would return back 0 if there were no key value pairs in there. All right. So if I say if len of errors is greater than 0, then that means that I had some errors right here. And I really just want to redirect the person right away because I don't want to put this in my database. They failed validations, right? All right, so let's just return a redirect here. Okay. Now, otherwise, if we get past this right here, that means that our validations were okay, right? And we're still going to create the movie and still return them back anyway, right? We're going to return them back. Yes?
So what's the post data right now? For now.
So post right now is just request.post. That's what came through the form.
Right.
Okay. So whatever title they entered, whatever description, whatever year they put
You
is all
create
that is.
another post underscore data from the models, right?
I think I see what you're saying. So here, this is a parameter, right? It's what the function accepts. It's going to accept something called post data. However, in this context, I have something called post. That's what I'm passing it as an argument. So when the function is getting called, it's now actually an argument. When we defined the function, it's called a parameter. So those names don't have to be the same.
Oh, okay.
They're two different contexts.
Okay.
Right? Okay. All right, so let's see if we can get this working. If we could at least not allow somebody to put in some blank data, right? So let's go here, and I'm just going to put a year, but no data here. Okay, did we get anything entered inside the database? No. Why not?
Because you don't have the title and description of description.
Yeah, because our validations prevented it from happening, right? Okay. However, that's not super friendly because I came back to this page, hey, nothing got entered into the database, but I don't know why, right? You haven't told the user why this is failing. So we need to actually let the user know, what did you do wrong? Okay? So inside here, if we have some errors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this thing called the messages framework that Django gives us access to. I think this will allow me to import it, okay? So you guys are going to import from django.contrib messages. And messages will allow us to display something on the very next page that gets rendered, showing them, hey, this didn't validate properly. Okay? So what we're going to do, if there were some errors, is we need to iterate through those errors and then add them to the messages. Okay? So let's say, how do we iterate through a dictionary? Does anyone remember? I'm going to do something like this. For error in errors.values. Right? And that'll just give me the values because I'm not really going to do anything with the keys. I just want to know what are those error messages that I need to show my user. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say messages dot error, or is it errors? Okay, so we're going to say we want to add an error message, and we have to pass in the request every time. The next thing that we want to pass in is what is the actual error message. So that's going to be error in this case, right? Okay. So let's save that, and then let's go back to our template because right now our template doesn't know anything about these error messages, so we want to display those to the users. So go in here. I'll put them up above the form. So let's loop through the messages, right? Okay. So I'll do my for each Python here, and we'll say for message in messages. So messages are going to be available by default. This is being provided again by the Django framework. And then I'm just going to put a little p tag here, and not get autocomplete. Sweet. All right. Now how do I output the message itself? Double curly, right? Message. Okay. So there's that, and then if I wanted to make it look a certain color or something like that, I could say style color red. I'm just being a little lazy because normally we'd probably use a style sheet of some sort, but I'm gonna skip that part. Yeah, nice, right? All right, let me try this one more time here. Okay. So now we're getting validations on title and description. That's cool. See, I actually put a year in this case. What happens if I don't put in a year? Uh-oh. Ooh. Yellow page of death, right? All right. Yeah. Woo! It's getting personal in here. Yeah, so the problem that we ran into here is we were trying to convert an empty string into an integer, and Django's growling at us, right? So what can we do here? That was the thing that I was looking for, and I knew we were going to hit that. So what we can do is something called try except. Has anyone come across this in any languages or Python at all? No? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to try something, and then if it fails, we'll know that we failed validation, right? So we're going to try to convert it to an integer, and then if that gives us some kind of an exception, I know that the person has not entered in a number. Okay, so I can validate off of that as well. So let's go back to our models.py. This is where we had our manager, right? And then I'm going to do something here. Try except. Oops. Okay. So the way that this works, this is kind of like an if-else type situation. I'm going to try some code, and then if that code breaks, I'm going to end up down here in the except block. All right? Well, the difference between this and an if and else is that in an if-else situation, if my code breaks inside the if, it just breaks entirely. I never even get inside the else because it just stops at that point. This way, we can kind of control the flow a little bit. If it breaks inside this try block, I'll end up inside the except block. My code will keep running, in other words. It'll stop it from just completely breaking and stopping. All right. So inside that try block, let's just try to convert the year. So we'll say int post data year. Okay, and then if we get inside this except, that means that they didn't provide us, either they didn't provide us a number, maybe they put in some letters or something like that, or it's just a blank string, in which case that would also break it. Okay, so if we get inside the except block, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say errors at year, and then I'll say please specify an integer for the year. Okay. Or I can also just bring in this guy right here. So I could try to do this. I'm gonna move some stuff around, guys, so don't get alarmed here. I'm gonna bring this if condition up inside the try block. It's gonna look a little nasty because we're gonna have an extra level of indentation here. So in other words, we're gonna try this thing that we had previously, okay? And if it breaks, what I know is that they've entered some kind of an invalid year, right? Because I know that it can break if they enter in nothing at all. So let's try that. So let me delete some of these lines here. Let's go back to our app real quick. Refresh that guy. Okay. So now it's working the way we expect. Please specify an integer for the year. I know line 13 might be a little problematic for you guys, so let's have some questions on that if you have any. Anybody want to try explaining it? If you're feeling real adventurous.
So if we enter, for example, 1,000, then we'll return the first error message in the if statement, right?
Correct. Yeah, we would end up inside here, right? Please provide a valid year. So let's try that out. So if we go 1,000, please provide a valid year. Now the other thing that we could do, because I think you were saying before, let's make sure they don't enter something that's beyond what our current year is or something like that.
So we add a and.
So we can add a or, right? So if, whoops, or int post data year is greater than 2019. We could do that as well, right? So if I try to go 2025, we're still getting please provide a valid year, right? Because we're outside of the range that we're accepting.
Can you instead of 2019, can you do a maybe a date?
Yeah, definitely. And that would obviously be the better way to do it. Yeah.
For Python's try, does it catch? Or
The catch is the except right here.
Is it? Because I feel like the catch. Because my understanding of like a try catch was you're specifically looking for the different error types.
Mm-hmm.
So you can dictate which error was generated. So I'm guessing in this one it's everything because you're not really specifying what error is there.
True. Yeah, and I don't want to delve into that. I'll send you the syntax on it separately because it's something that everyone here could easily get confused about, and it's not something that you have to know. But yeah, I'll make a point to get you that information. Okay, so again, just to kind of re-go over what's happening here is this inside this try and except is that if my code breaks anywhere inside that try block, I end up right here in the except block, okay? And then it keeps running. Versus if our code breaks normally, it just stops at that point and I never get to anything past there, okay? So this is a way for us to potentially handle some errors if we know that we might get one. So I'm going to try and say if this int is less than 1888, so it was before the first movie, or it's past 2019, which is the current year, then let's just make an error for that, right?
Question.
Mhm.
Is the try except can be like a specific statement only for validation, or you can apply it to other situations?
You can apply it to other situations. Yeah, it's not specific to validations. Depending on how I decide to do the email validation with you guys, we could potentially use this again for that. The platform has you guys using things called regular expressions, which sound kind of scary and sometimes look kind of scary, but Django also has a built-in email validator that we could potentially use. That's kind of that's how I've taught it before, but I may do the regular expressions just because it's kind of a good thing to see at some point, you know? All right. So that's it. We've been able to validate these movies and make sure of a couple things. We're making sure that at least there's a title, at least there's a description, and we also know that the year is between the range that we want and that they actually provided a year, right? All right. So then tomorrow, when we do our validations, it's going to be validating a person who's trying to register with the site. And then later on, validating their actual login activity. Okay? Yeah. But the principle behind it is basically going to be the same. It's just our conditions are going to be maybe a little bit different, right? You know, we want to make sure that they have a valid email, for instance. That's something that we want to know. All right. All right, guys. I've heard the thumbs are being requested. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Thumbs on this. Yeah. AJ felt good about this. That makes me feel good. Some sideways over here. Isaiah liked it. Alan not so much. All right. Any questions before we talk about maybe doing some pair programming? I heard Jessica's reaction. It's just priceless. Oh. All right, I'm just gonna stop the video.